The following program may contain coarse language, violence, nudity, mature subject matter, or scenes which may not be suitable for all viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back, one and all. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. Now, if you'd like to send me an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, Xzone Radio TV. And you can always watch the Xzone TV channel, 724 365. We have great paranormal movies, paranormal shows, paranormal documentaries, and much more. 724 365, exclusive to Simul TV. And if you'd like to find out how you can subscribe to Simul TV, visit www.simultv.com. Xzone Nation, my guest this hour is Lance Daniel. We're going to be talking about the paranormal, psychic abilities, and much more. Joining me now is Lance Daniel. And Lance, welcome to the X Zone.
Well, thanks. Nice to see you again. It's been a minute.
Nice. It has. Nice talking to you. And thanks very much for joining us.
Sure.
Can you share with our listeners your connection with the paranormal and how it got there? It's a fascinating story.
Well, it started when I was around 7 years old, and this was in the late 60s. And my mother had an acquaintance that would come over to the house from time to time who was a psychic, so-called. And I didn't believe in any of that nonsense. I was going to be a scientist or an engineer, and I was going to disprove what she said she could do. So I devised an experiment, which she passed. And that experiment involved me placing a photograph into an envelope, a manila envelope that I got from my father's desk. And I hid it in my room and made sure no one saw what I was doing. Bided my time. And then when she came over, I walked up to her. She was seated on the couch, and I stuck my hand out with the sealed envelope in my hand. And I said, "If you're so good, you can tell me what's in this envelope." And no, not him, not yet. It's the other photo outside. And so she didn't even touch it. She said, "Set it there on the coffee table," which I did. And she just closed her eyes, and she had these black eyes, and there you go, for just a few seconds. And she opened her eyes and looked at me and said, "It's a photograph. It's outdoors. There's grass. There's a vertical metal pole. There are two children standing by this pole. One of them has a ball. It's a black and white photo of two kids playing tetherball." And that's the photo from around 1968. And I was astonished. How the heck could she do that? How? And I wanted a logical explanation. So I was, trying to figure it out. Did I whisper it subconsciously? Did I somehow give it away? And then I thought the only logical explanation is she could do that. So she said, "Do you want to know how?" And I said, "Yes." And I sat on the couch next to her, and she explained how she trained herself to do that. How about that? Rob, I'm not hearing you.
No, okay. Did she ever tell you how she did that, or did she train you at all?
She did. So what she said is that she made some extra money for her family. She's a mother of six, by writing articles. And she was looking for something in the science literature to write about that no one else had written about. And she came across a protocol that had been translated from Cyrillic Russian to English. And it said that Russian scientists had been able to teach people to see color with their hands. And she thought, "Oh, come on, that can't be." So she thought, "I'll write an article about that." But then she thought a little more, and she thought, "I know, I will try it myself and see if I can do it and write about my experience." And that's how she started with that. And she trained herself to see colors with her eyes closed, on paint chips. You can go to a hardware store and get those.
Sure.
And then she would have them in a different room and have someone shuffle them. And then she would say the order. And then she would put them Yeah, she'd have someone do it across town, and she was trying to figure out, can I still do
Right.
that even if at distance or without, being physically near them? And the answer was yes. And with a bunch of practice, she was able to do that with a high level of accuracy. So then she started thinking, what else can I do with my mind? And that started her down a path of being this psychic mechanic, they called her.
And what was this person's name?
Betty Jagers.
We've had the opportunity of having her on the show before, and she was one heck of a lady.
Oh, yeah. She was the most astonishing person. I mean, I'm happy to share stories with you, but it's like, unless you experience it yourself, you go, oh, it's a nice story. But if you experience it, then you know for sure what can be done.
Well, wasn't she featured in one of Leonard Nimoy's In Search of?
She was In Search of Psychic Detectives. And that was an episode which mostly featured a recreation of her working with the police on the Sally Lucas missing person case.
Now, you yourself are an attorney.
Right.
Yeah, you're very logical. You go by facts. You go by evidence. You
Right.
investigate. And here you are a few years later in life. Do you ever look back and say, wow, I saw it firsthand. I know it's real.
I do, but who do I share that with?
Well, you're sharing it with our audience tonight.
Well,
We
yeah,
believe.
I know, fortunately, and I appreciate it. But I mean, generally, like on an everyday basis, I mean, who do I share that with? Because it's just all story to people. Unless, and this is what Bebby would do when she was interviewed, is she would devise an experiment to have the person interviewing her do it themselves. And then when they experience themselves, what are they going to do? Deny their own experience? And she did that with it.
Now, you sent us to what? I'm sorry, go ahead.
She did this with a writer for a very well-known magazine that came to interview her. And he started the interview with his head kind of cocked to the side, like, yeah, right. And she said, no, I'm not going to tell you stories. I'm going to teach you how to do it. And there was a whole group of people gathered round. This was in a convention in New Mexico for remote viewers. And she had him hold a Ziploc bag of dirt. That's what it was. Literally, it was dirt from the ground. And said, okay, move your mind to where this dirt is from and now describe it. And he said, it's from the ground. But then very quickly he started saying, I don't know why I'm saying this. And it's like, well, just go with it. And he's like, I'm seeing like indigenous persons. I don't know who they are, but they look like they might be Aztecs or Toltecs or Mayans or something like that. And they're in this area where there's a bunch of like earthen mounds, and it's close to a river. And of course, that dirt came from Cahokia Mounds. And he was astonished to find that. How did he come up with that? He saw it in his mind. And then when he reported that back to his magazine, they said, yeah, we're not publishing that story.
Why not?
Because
that's a great story.
It's a great story, except that the magazine was a magazine that was a science magazine. And they said, we can't publish that because we believe in science and it's anecdotal and it's your experience. And we're not doing it. We're just not doing it. What they really wanted was this writer, a nice man to go there and write something that poo-pooed the whole thing, and then they'd print it. But the truth, they
say seeing is believing.
And doing it yourself. When you do it,
Yeah. Now you sent us two other photos.
Yes.
One is a sketch that Bevy did, and the other is the actual photo. Take us through that story.
Okay, so in the early 70s, there was a high school girl who had disappeared. Nobody knew where she went. It was a small town in the Midwest, and the search was on, and the police contacted Bevy and her Psi squad. Now, Bevy did not interlope with law enforcement. She would wait until law enforcement contacted her, and then she worked with people she trained, many in law enforcement themselves, on the QT, you know. And then she would work, didn't want publicity, didn't want their names out there. And she had good reasons for it. One, it was public service. Two, if there's someone out there committing homicide, she didn't want her name out there going, and I'm looking to try to find you. That's not a good idea.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And so it was not for glamour. It was not for publicity for herself. It was to do some good. You see, her dad was a cop, her brother was a cop, her uncle was a cop. She grew up in a family of cops. And actually, when she was growing up, she wanted to be a police detective. But in those days, women were not police detectives. And so her way of being a detective was, after she trained herself, was to work with the police. And she would make it clear with them that she doesn't take credit. She's merely a tool that can be used, and they put the case together. So you've never heard her say, I solved the case. Never. You know, the press can say whatever they want, but she never said that. All right. So what happened was, there was this high school girl missing, and she was contacted. And she requested something that she could hold in her left hand, and that her group members could hold in their left hands. And they got a photograph, and they got an article of clothing that the missing person had worn. Now, the other thing is, Bevy's deal was, don't tell me anything about the case. Don't even really tell me who's missing. Just stop there. I don't want any information at all. Don't want to cloud my mind. And also, if I tell you who it is, man or woman, boy, girl, et cetera, then you know that I'm right on the signal line. So that was another test for her, a confirmation. She got these things, and she said, okay, here is the person that I see that's committing these crimes. It's a homicide. You'll find out that she is murdered. And I'm being careful here, tonight, not to mention names or places, because there may be some people that are still alive, and I don't want to re-hurt anybody,
Sure.
So, okay. So here's what happens is, she would draw who she saw along with descriptions. Now, notice that's her handwriting, and it says face may be thinner. Because she thought, even though she drew it that way, that his face was longer and thinner. And then he had these sort of long, what she called Elvis Presley-like sideburns. And she said, he's killed before, he's killed now, and he will kill again and continue to kill until he's stopped. And a few months later, there was another young lady that was disappeared from the same area. And then after that, it was another woman who this person tried to capture, but she got away and got his license plate, and that's how they eventually caught him. She told the police what the man looked like, why he committed these murders, what he had done, where they would find the body of the first girl that disappeared. And she even got a map from them, and using her senses, put an X on this map. And when they found her body, it was in an area of water, which is what she described, right where she had put the X on the map. How about that?
That's amazing, especially when you see this next photo that we're going to put up right now, Craig.
Yeah, but hold on. She also said that the man's last name started with a B and might be 2 syllables. And okay, now we can go to the other photo. There he is. That's the perpetrator, and he was caught, convicted, and I don't even know if he's still alive. But remember, she said face could be thinner, long sideburns, straight hair. There was a whole description that she wrote out. She was amazing like that. I mean, it's astonishing. The other thing is that his last name is Bowman. 2 syllables beginning with a B.
Yeah.
Now, there was another case in the early 90s.
All right, we're going to have a little bit of a cliffhanger here. I've got to take my first break, so please stand by.
All right.
Exonation, our guest is Lance Daniel. We're talking about the paranormal, remote viewing, and much more. Don't go away. This is going to be one heck of an hour here in the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell. Don't go away. X Zone Nation, Lance Daniel is my guest, and we're talking about the paranormal. Actually, with this past first segment, we were talking about Bevy. How did you pronounce her name? Jagers, right?
Yes, Jagers.
Jagers, yeah. You were just going to start telling us a new story, but I had to go for my break. So if you'd continue, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So in the early 90s in Northern California, when I was living and working as a lawyer back then, there had been somebody who had gone into a convenience store and murdered the clerk. By the way, I'm also leaving out certain details that might upset people, so trying to be
sure. I appreciate that.
And they had no clues. Now, this was not. People didn't have cell phones with cameras. They didn't have security cameras. A lot of places, so they didn't have anything. There's no witnesses, and it didn't appear that there was robbery. So then, a little while later, in the same area, there was a restaurant, and this person had gone in and murdered the staff that worked there, and no money was taken. And so the press was calling this person the thrill killer. And the hunt was on, and people were very afraid to go out, particularly in that area of town. Well, I called Bevy. Bevy lived in St. Louis, and she said, well, if the police want to contact me, I'll work with them. And I said, yeah, but, why don't you tell me what you get anyway? Because I used to work at the district attorney's office, and I can take that to a deputy DA that I know that would be open to this, and she can get it. And she went, well, okay. So, and she said, write this down, because the way she worked is she would get her information or impression, she'd write it down. And then the next thing, like in a column, she'd write the next thing down and the next thing down and the next thing down. And if she got an image or a picture, she'd put that and draw it off to the side. She started off by saying, it's a male, he's young, he's thin, he has a very brooding attitude. He's the kind that will drive around at night brooding and brooding and brooding. And I said, what does he brood over? And she said, something that happened to him as a boy. And he's quite dangerous. And this didn't just start recently. He's been doing crimes starting with animals when he was a kid. And then she said, she described what he looked like, said he was wearing a hunting jacket and blue tennis shoes with white soles. And I said, do you get a name or initials? And I remember her response. We're on the phone and she goes, who do you think I am? I'm not God. You want his address? You want to know what booth he's sitting in at Denny's? And I said, oh, yeah, you got it,
Yeah.
So she, anyway, she said he has the initials E.L., and with a middle name that sounds something like Roy or Ray. And then she said the L is Leon or Leonard. And I said, okay, so E.L., middle name Roy or Ray, L for Leon or Leonard. And she goes, yes. And then she said, but look, if the police want to contact me, I can do a lot better than that. If they send me an item or something. So I said, okay. I took that stuff over that I'd written down to my friend. A while later, this person was caught and convicted, and he was a white guy, thin, wore a hunting jacket and blue tennis shoes, and his name is Eric Royce Leonard.
My gosh.
Yeah, and later on, I was talking to a nurse that worked at the county jail, and she told me, just happened to tell me, oh, yeah, I treated him for a minor thing. And I said, what was he like? And she said, he's very broody. And it's like, wow.
Why isn't this information given more freely? Like, why don't members of law enforcement and members of society understand that there are people that are gifted like Bevy and that they can be an asset to not only law enforcement, but everyday people's lives. Why do you think it has the negative connotation that it does have?
I think it's associated with carnivals. It's associated with frauds, tea leaf readers, card flippers, the whole entertainment business. And people do not want to look like fools, right? They're professionals. They don't want to say, oh, I'm doing something that's very woo-woo, and then everyone's going to get on them about that's crazy. We use science, we use training, we use techniques, we use experience, we use shoe leather, and that's how we solve crimes. You don't just sit in a chair drinking a cup of coffee and smoking a Carlton 100 and say, X marks the spot, that's where you'll find the body, and here's the person, I'll draw them for you. And yet, there are people that can. So then the question is, does law enforcement work with people that have demonstrated a record of being accurate and being discreet? Yes, they do. But do they broadcast that? No, they don't. All right. One of the members of the Psi Squad for a long time was the acting chief of police for a medium-sized police department in the Midwest. And, he had to be very low-key about that. And he took risks, and he did it. So what happens if you would have called that department and say, do you use psychics to help you solve crimes? And they would deny it up one side and down the other. And yet their own chief of police used to do that himself.
It's fun. It's funny because I thought that when the X-Files came out and you have Mulder and Scully, two members of the FBI working on cases using, their investigative techniques to investigate paranormal phenomena, that it would be an opening for legitimate psychics like Bevy to get the recognition that she so justly deserved. And yet I think the X-File may have done more damage than good.
You think so, huh?
Yeah. How about you?
Well, you know what? Okay, so the group worked with the lead FBI agent at one time, it was the biggest story in the country for months. And it was a missing person case. And I worked with that person directly, and another member of the squad. So, will they work with people? Yeah. Are they going to tell them that they do? No.
What I was trying to get across, Lance, was that instead of promoting the fact that there are people that work with law enforcement, and I thought maybe it would open the door to the recognition of the psychics and the mediums that do work for law enforcement, I didn't see that happening. Especially when they got into the woo aspects, that totally took away from the credibility of people like Bevy.
Yeah. Men and stare at goats. It's entertainment only. You're a fool if you believe it. As a lawyer, let me tell you, lawyers are all about, like you said, the tangible. Can I hold it in my hand? Can I see it? Can I hear it? Is it something physical that I can point to? And the answer is no, then it's not real. And think about it. When we grow up, aren't we told, this is fantasy and that's just imagination. It's not real. Right. And yet imagination can be very real and can create real things. Bevy did it. I saw her. I know she did that. Would you like to know how?
You're right about us being.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you cut out there. So you were going to say, would you like to know? And then you cut out for a second.
Oh, okay. Bevy had polio as a child, and she had hip dysplasia, and they lived in a 2-story house, and it was getting more and more difficult for her to go up and down the stairs. And she wanted a ranch-style house all on one level, and she wanted to live in the best neighborhood of town, and they couldn't afford it back then on her husband's salary. And she decided to try an experiment. And this experiment was, she sat in her bed, and night after night, she imagined living in her dream house. What did it smell like? What was cooking in the kitchen? What did the floor feel like on her feet? What did she see out of the front windows? Did she see her garden out of the back? What did it smell like? Everything. She tried to incorporate all of her senses into this, and she wrote down little words to cue her memory in a small spiral notebook. and she'd read it over and over again until she was sleepy and she would fall asleep. And she did this for quite a long time until she got bored with it because she felt like it was already done. It already exists. My imagination created something. It's just not here yet. And she just went, it'll be here. It's just not here yet. And that was her experiment. A while later, a man visiting St. Louis flipped on the TV at his hotel right as Bevy was coming on stage as a guest. So the channel was set to that station. And he thought, I wonder if she could use her trained ability to help me with investments. And she never tried that. She was always working in the area of crime and other things. And she, as an experiment, she did. And she gave him advice. And he, unbeknownst to her, invested his entire life savings of $24,000 on what she said. And she freaked out. She said, I freaked out. Who would take the word of a psychic and invest their life savings? And so then what happened was the investment went down and then it went down again, but then it started to go up. And in the end, that $24,000 peaked out at just over $2 million.
Wow.
And he said, I'm buying you a house, and go shopping for a house, in the exact house in the neighborhood she wanted. There it was. He bought it for her, paid taxes. She got the title, and that made national news. Psychic gets $60,000 house, which was quite a house in the Midwest in those days.
Unbelievable. And yet it's true.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely true. She just loved to experiment to see what the mind. We can go a million different directions. Where would you like to go?
I'd like to hear more about her experiments because, what can I say? She was on this show. She did that. She did the other thing. The fact that she actually talked to this guy, he got $2 million back on a $24,000 investment.
Yeah, it was in coffee futures.
Wow.
Yeah, it was printed all over. Yeah.
So what else did she do that blew you away?
Okay. So this didn't make the news, of course, but I used to go country dancing a lot. I was at my usual country place, and I had the sense Bevy wanted to talk. And she usually only talked at night because she'd sleep all day, and she liked the quiet of the night to think and to write. And so I had this strong sense she wanted me to call her. And I went home eventually. I called her up, and she said, about time. I've been trying to get you to call me. And I said, yes, I know. Before I could say another word, she said, I saw you talking to a platinum blonde with tight curly hair, round face, very animated expression and eyes. And she was going on and on about some country singer who she didn't like the sound of his voice. Well, right before I went home, I was talking with a woman who looked exactly like that. And she was talking about a country singer, Aaron Tippin, and how he sounded nasally to her, and she doesn't like his voice. She just would move her mind and figure out where I was, see what it was, and then describe it later before I could say a thing. How about that?
That's amazing. It seems like she was on the forefront of remote viewing.
Yes. And when they declassified the remote viewing program, she called me up. This is 1995, somewhere in there. Yeah. And she said, if you see Nightline, I don't stay up that late. And she said, oh, well, there was this program, blah, blah, blah. And then she said, okay, so you should know I was part of that as a civilian. Really? And then she said, do you want to meet the scientists that developed it and some of the military people? And I said, yes. And that's how I ended up meeting those people. Wow. Are they intelligent?
Amazing.
Oh,
you've got to stand by. You've got to stand by. We've got to take a break. We'll be right back. Exxon Nation. Lance Daniel is our special guest. What a great show. Stand by. And welcome back, everyone. Lance Daniel is our guest. Lance, some of the people that you met who Bevy had worked with on the remote viewing, was one of them Russell Targ by any chance?
Yes. And
yeah, he's quite a guy.
Yes. Quite a guy. Wow, is he intelligent. But it's not just intelligent and you don't understand what he's saying. He can take the most complicated concepts, including quantum physics, and make them simple and easy to understand and entertaining too.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
had the pleasure of having him on the show a number of times. Great guy.
Oh yeah.
Have you ever tried remote viewing yourself?
Well, no.
Yeah, well, no.
No, but I have created things for myself, if you
Really?
will.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'd like to hear that because I've got a few things I need. So maybe you can teach me how to create them.
well, okay, I didn't invent this, right? You understand that Bevy taught me uh, how to do this when I was young. And,
Okay.
I'm not a true believer in stuff. I mean, I'm going to try it out. And if it proves itself in the doing,
Hmm.
then okay. Again, you can't deny your own experiences. Well, I wanted to work at the district attorney's office after I graduated from law school. And the district attorney's office in the town I was living in, it was small, and the turnover was little. And I was told you'll never get a job there because you either have to be a relative of somebody that already works there, or you have to work as an unpaid intern for several years and kind of, kiss up. And then if they have an opening, and that's how it goes. Now, I never worked there. I never applied to work there. I just instead worked in engineering during the summers. Well, I passed the bar. And in those days, you didn't go on the internet to find out your bar results. You got a letter. And the whole conversation was it the small letter or the big letter? The small one says you passed. And the big one is an application to try it again, right? It was the
Oh
small
boy.
letter. Oh boy, oh boy. And it always came out around Thanksgiving, right? And you're like, oh God, thanks for ruining my holidays. Or yes, what a great holiday. Just the way it is. May
Yeah.
still be true that way today. Okay, so what happened was there was a small legal newspaper, sort of half size, and they would publish the bar results for people that passed all around the state. So in California, where I practice law, about maybe 1,500 people would pass the bar at the time. And they would take in tiny little fonts every name and they put it in these columns in alphabetical order in this newspaper that mostly people don't read unless, it's some kind of update on some law thing. And who wants to read that? Well, the next day after I had passed the bar, I got a phone call from the DA's office. And this man says, I'm looking for Lance Daniel. And I said, well, you found him. And he said, I'm calling from the district attorney's office. And my first thought was, oh no, what did I do?
Of course. Yeah.
Right. I was thinking, what is this? Some kind of unpaid parking ticket or I don't know what. And then he says, so do you want to work here? And I said, yes, I do. And he said, great, you got to come down on fill out all the background stuff. And then I said, how did you end up calling me? I mean, this is a shock, frankly. And he said, it's the strangest thing. I got into the office. I was told yesterday I got to find someone right away. And it's an entry level position in misdemeanors. And I walked into my office with my cup of coffee. And as I set it down, the newspaper, the Daily Recorder, was on my desk. It happened to be open to the page where the bar results were. And he said, I glanced at it and your name jumped right off the page at me. I've never experienced anything like it. I was so startled by it. And I thought, I don't know. They said, find someone. I called investigation. They got me your number. And that's how I called you. Now, come on, really? What happened prior to that, though, is interesting because Bevy told me every night before you go to sleep, I want you to imagine walking into the district attorney's office, and I want you to feel what it feels like, feel it real. I want you to occupy that state. Don't think about it from afar. Don't look at it like you're watching a movie. You have to move right on in and do a behavior, act in that state. So what would be natural to you? And I said, well, I'd walk in and take the elevator up probably to the fourth floor, which was the top floor. And the DA would swear me in and I'd probably shake someone's hands and congratulations. He goes, perfect. Shake someone's hand, congratulating you. Now you got the physical touch. You've got the sound of hearing them say congratulations, the feeling inside you. You've got the visual, going up in the elevator, all that stuff. Combine it in your head and do that over and over again every night before you fall asleep, and then fall asleep in that. And then you'll get to a point where it's just real and it's inevitable and you don't have to do it anymore. And then I did that for most of my last year of law school, and the rest of the story.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever used what Bevy taught you in a court case as a lawyer?
Yes. Okay, so actually there was a TV program where Bevy was on it with me, and it was on originally the Learning Channel, and then I think A&E bought them. And the show had a name like Journal of the Unexplained or something like that, or Journal of the Unknown. And the idea was that I had a client, and she was being transported in an ambulance, and she was what they call circling the drain. Do you know what that means?
No, sir.
That's a paramedic. If somebody is so close to dying, the paramedics will say they're circling the drain. Maybe they don't say that where you are, but you know that they out here they'll say that. And so she was circling the drain with this very explosive asthma attack, and the ambulance got lost on the way to the hospital. Why would the ambulance get lost? Because they didn't know the area. They had been brought in from a different area that they didn't normally serve due to a shortage of ambulances. Well, she ended up dying. So I called up Bevy and I said, I have this case. The relatives came to me. I need to know what happened inside the ambulance and why they got lost. And she described it in great detail, moment by moment, almost play by play, what was going on, who was there, what their attitudes were, what they were saying. And later, when I got the run reports from the fire department and from the emergency personnel, what she said and what actually happened matched line by line, including what they said at their depositions. And as a result, I was able to settle that case.
Stand by, counselor. We have one final break to take. When we come back, we'll be wrapping up this hour with our special guest, Lance Daniel. And if you'd like to send us an email, X Zone Nation is very simple. xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, and on all social media sites, X Zone Radio TV. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. Whatever you do, don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. Lance Daniel is my guest. First of all, Lance, thank you so much for joining us tonight and for sharing the adventures that you've had with Bevy over the years. And how do you, after all you've seen, all you've heard, all you've learned, deal with skepticism when it comes to the paranormal and the ability of people like Bevy to do what she did?
Well, what I do is I say, well, I can show you and you can prove it to yourself if you'd like. For people that are, skepticism is good. That doesn't mean you're a denier. For people that are just straight deniers, I don't do anything because there's nothing you can do. Their mind's made up. And, you know, they'll say, oh, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. Okay, here's the extraordinary proof. You know, talk to the scientists with the remote viewing program. They have decades of data that was used and actionable by the military, by the intelligence services, and they'll go, nope, don't believe it, still couldn't be true. Those people don't waste my time, right? Other people, it's like, let me just show you, it's pretty easy. Everyone can do it to some degree. It's a natural thing. It's just like athleticism. Some people are natural athletes, some people are natural musicians, natural cooks, et cetera, et cetera. And with some training, they can develop. And some people are just superstars from the beginning. So in dealing with them, I don't deal with the deniers. With the skeptics, I offer them an opportunity to experience it themselves. And if they don't want to do it, then I'm like, okay, well, so be it. I can't spend my life trying to prove what I already know. It's, you know, doesn't get anywhere.
Whatever happened to the U.S. PSI squad?
Well, so Bevy passed away almost 21 years ago. And after that, I ran it for a while, but the number of requests for help from law enforcement disappeared after she passed away. And then different members of it just went back to living their lives. And some of them have passed away. And some really just said, okay, it was a great experience. And I know what's real and what isn't, but I just don't want to pursue that anymore. And some people have reached positions in their lives that they don't want to jeopardize. But
that's sad.
Find out they work and they do stuff like that.
That's sad. Tell me, do you miss it?
Yeah. Bevy was, I know this sounds crazy, but she was always right. And I used to argue with her all the time. I really did. I'd say, that's illogical. There's no evidence for it. It's frankly preposterous, ridiculous. You pick the adjective. There's no way, you're wrong about it. And then she turned out to be right.
Here's a far off question. Has
Yeah.
Bevy ever tried to communicate with you from the other side?
Yes. Okay. So 2 things that happened.
Okay.
We had discussions about, do you survive physical death? And I had 2 clocks on my glass coffee table at home. One was a 8-day clock. One was a travel clock. They're both antiques because I collect vintage and antique items. So, of course, they're mechanical. They run at different speeds, and the travel clock's going to run out of juice long before the 8-day clock. Well, shortly after she passed away, I had this sense that somebody was watching me from an overstuffed chair in my living room. But I thought, that's crazy. That's just crazy, right? And then a friend came over, and a girlfriend actually, and she walks in the door and she goes, "Oh my God." And I said, "What?" She goes, "There's some kind of energy or something over there by that chair, the overstuffed chair. I think it's your friend Bevy. I can't see her, but I think she's watching us." And I go, "Oh, come on, really?" Because I'm thinking, wow, I just thought that. Then I looked at those 2 clocks. Both clocks had stopped at 8:59. Now, why would they both stop at the same time? Because the 8-day clock would usually run a lot longer. And at the same minute, then I looked closer, and both hands had stopped at 8:59 and a half. And it was so bizarre. Later, I found out that they believed that she passed away right about 8:59.
Wow.
Then still later, months later, I had a dream. And we had these discussions when she was alive about when somebody passes away, you have to let them go because some people will feel like they're stuck and still here. So don't hang on to me. She goes, "I've told all my family when it's my time, let me go." And she showed up in a dream, and it was, those dreams where you don't realize you're dreaming till you wake up. You're like really living in that reality. And there she was. Yeah, And there she was, but she wasn't the Bevy I knew. Not 65-year-old, Bevy. She was maybe in her 20s, and she looked great. I'd never known that Bevy, okay? And not in my life. And I said, "Bevy, is that you? Is that really you?" And she said, "Yes, it's really me." And I said, "Wow." And she goes, "Now, don't hold on to me. You've got to let me go. After this, you won't see me again." And I'm positive that was her. And so years later, when people say, "Well, you think Bevy's still around you?" And I go, "No, she's not. I let her go, and she's gone on." Well, I hope that answers your question.
It sure does. It sure does. And it also tells me that you really miss your friend.
Yeah, I can't believe it's been 21 years. I mean, wow.
I'm sitting here saying, my God, I had her on the show a couple of times. And that was 21 years ago.
And I was on one of the shows with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Well, what would you like to share with her? What are your final thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience tonight, Lance?
Well, I'd like to share that psychic ability, which the physicists now call anomalous cognition, anomalous, we can't explain it, cognition, awareness, is natural, it's normal, it's not woo-woo, it's people can do it, and instead of being afraid of it and shoving it to the side all the time, if they're interested in it, go ahead and try it for themselves. It'll prove it in the testing. And realize that it can be both a great gift to be able to have a sense of things and rely on your gut. What the heck? Police do it. Soldiers do it. Firemen do it. Doctors do it. They may not say, "Oh, I'm a psychic," but they're going to tell you, "I had a hunch, I had an instinct, I have a feeling," and they rely on that, and it saves their life. It saves the lives of others, etc. If they can do it, why not you?
Well, I'll tell you, Lance, when I was in law enforcement as a police officer, I used to get that gut feeling, and it never, ever was proven wrong. And it saved my butt a couple of times.
Yeah. and sometimes people don't even recognize it. I went to law school with a retired highway patrol, and he told me that the normal routine when you gave someone a traffic ticket back then is you just kind of walk up with your ticket book and he goes, and then officers got killed doing that. And he said he started his normal routine just like he was going to do it to get a speeding ticket, and something inside of him so strong said, don't do that, hang back. And as he approached the car a little slower, he saw a gun barrel pointed at him from the back seat. And and so he just said, oh, hey, sorry about this. You were going a little faster. I'm just going to write you a ticket and let you go. He walked back to his car, wrote a ticket, let them drive off, and then they caught him right down the road. But he said, that saved my life. That instinct.
I've got to tell you, Lance, it's been a pleasure talking to you again after all these years.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for sharing so many stories about Bevy. And you've always got a welcome mat placed at your door to come back anytime and visit us here in the X Zone. So until then, my friend, thank you so much. Take care of yourself. Be safe. And thanks again.
Thank you.
Take care, buddy. X Zone Nation, our guest this hour has been Lance Daniel. And wow. I can't believe that Bevy and Lance were on 21 years ago. Where's the time gone? So tell me, X Zone Nation, are you a skeptic or are you a believer? I don't mean just about what we talked about this hour here in the X Zone. I mean, are you a skeptic or a believer when it comes to UFOs, Bigfoot, ancient mysteries, all the topics that we discuss here in the X Zone? I'd like to hear from you. X-Zone at xzoneradiotv.com. I'll be back at the top of the hour as the X-Zone continues with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. Don't go